Thank you for joining us for another episode of Marking the Times. It's great to have you with us every week. If this is a ministry that's blessing you, I pray you'll tell other people about it as we talk about things that are happening in our world that relate to end time prophecy and answer questions you send in. And that's what I want to do today is answer. It's actually 3 quick questions. So hopefully I'll be able to get all 3 of these answers in. But so let me get right to it. The first question is this: is the New Jerusalem, Revelation 21:16, the city where our Lord Jesus will rule for 1,000 years? Well, that kind of necessitates us talking just a little bit about what's going to be going on during the millennium. When Christ returns there in Revelation 19, after his return, it says in Revelation 21-6 that he's going to reign for 1,000 years on the earth. And so I take it that Jesus will be ruling and reigning on the earth during that time. And those of us who are in glorified bodies who've come back with him will be ruling and reigning with him. Now, at the end of the millennium, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth that's going to be made. God's going to make a new universe, and the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem, that 1,500-mile cube city, like a floating continent, it's going to come and sit on the new earth. It's kind of like the metropolis or the capital city of the new earth. And we don't know, though, during the millennium where that heavenly city is going to be. We know at the end of the millennium, it's going to come down out of heaven from God and sit on this new earth. But a lot of people have surmised, and this makes sense, that when Christ is ruling and reigning here on the earth during the millennium, that heavenly city may be suspended up in the heavens, kind of like a satellite that hovers over the earth. I do think that as believers in our glorified bodies, we'll have access to that heavenly city, and we'll also live here on the new earth and rule and reign with Christ as well. So we'll be able, I think, to go back and forth to the heavenly city. But during the millennium itself, I think Christ will primarily be ruling and reigning here on the earth in Jerusalem, sitting on David's throne, fulfilling the covenants that God made with the nation of Israel. So that's how I see Christ's relationship to the heavenly city during that time. A second question from this same person is, where is paradise located? The word paradise occurs 3 times in the New Testament. In Luke 23, remember Jesus as he's dying on the cross, and the thief says, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." And that word paradise is a Persian loan word that refers to like a garden. So it's looking at, I think, heaven and the garden city that God has prepared. That is that heavenly city, the New Jerusalem that we just talked about. Also in 2 Corinthians 12, Paul there says sometime during his life that he was caught up to the 3rd heaven. And then he says right after that, I was caught up to paradise. And by the way, the word caught up, there's a word for rapture, harpazo. So Paul experienced a personal rapture to the 3rd heaven. Now you know that there's 3 heavens. There's the atmospheric heaven that we live in and reside in. Then there's the stellar heaven where the stars are. And then there's the 3rd heaven where God's abode is. There's no 7th heaven spoken of in the Bible. So the 3rd heaven and paradise there are spoken of in the same way. Paul says, I'm caught up to the 3rd heaven. I'm caught up to paradise. So paradise there is heaven. It's this 3rd heaven where God exists, I think, in that heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. And then the final place we have the word paradise mentioned in the New Testament is in Revelation 2:7, when Jesus gives his reward to the overcomers, to the church at Ephesus. He says that you will eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. And so again, that tree of life's in the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. So paradise is heaven, where God exists, where God abides right now, the 3rd heaven. The final question is, do you believe Jesus may come back during the Feast of Trumpets? I don't believe the rapture will necessarily be at the Feast of Trumpets. Certainly it could be. One of my problems with placing the rapture at the Feast of Trumpets is every year in the fall, after the Feast of Trumpets comes and goes, then people could say, well, the rapture can't happen for another year. And it destroys that idea of imminency that I think is taught in the New Testament, that Christ could come in any moment. The feasts of Israel were fulfilled, the first 3 feasts, the spring feast and the first coming of Jesus. He died on Passover. He's resurrected at first fruits. The Spirit comes at Pentecost. And then I think those fall feasts will be fulfilled as well. I think the regathering of the Jewish people will happen at the Feast of Trumpets. And Matthew 24 speaks of them, the elect being gathered from all over the earth. The Day of Atonement will be fulfilled as the Jewish people turn to Jesus as their Messiah. And then I think the Feast of Tabernacles will be fulfilled in the millennial reign of Christ. So I do think those feast days are significant in Israel's program. Certainly as well, Jesus died on the cross for us on Passover. He rose from the dead. The Spirit came at Pentecost. We are the beneficiaries of that, but these are the feasts of Israel. So I think they have to do with Israel and the Jewish people more than with the church directly. Although, again, we're the beneficiaries, certainly, of Christ's death and his resurrection and the coming of the Spirit at the day of Pentecost. So Christ could come at the Feast of Trumpets. He can come at any time. But I prefer to believe that those are related more to Israel, and that we need to be looking for the coming of Christ, I think, at any moment, and not try to pinpoint the rapture to some specific day. So I know those are kind of brief answers to those three questions, but I hope that's helpful for you as you think about those issues. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Marking the Times. God bless you. I hope you have a good week.